AI Designing Data to Decisions by Shailesh Kumar. So Shailesh Kumar is having around 20 years of experience in building and innovation AI ML solutions across a wide variety of domains, including banking, finance, retail, insurance, telecom, manufacturing, healthcare, agriculture, etc. So in the past, Shailesh Kumar has spoke in a different multiple platforms like TEDx, World Economic Forum, NASCOM, UNESCO, Product Leadership Forum, Analytics India Magazine, Analytics Vidya, Times Group, etc. And in a different companies like Google, Microsoft, LinkedIn, Nvidia, Intel, Samsung, etc. And apart from that, the universities like ISB, IIT, IIT, BIT, BITS, and in Sofia as well. Shailesh sir, it's a pleasure to have you here. So everything is yours.
All right. Uh, can you hear me, Mahesh?
Yes,
And
sir.
you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I see there are quite a few students here, and it's my pleasure to address the next generation of India on a topic that is quite relevant and part of this conference. So what I'm going to talk about is sort of evolution in AI thinking in some sense, and what does that mean? And you've heard many speakers talk about AI, machine learning from different perspectives, right? So this is going to give you one more perspective. And like Mahesh said, I grew up with the field of AI, and for the last 20 years, I've been doing this. So my own idea of what AI is and how AI works and all that has evolved. So I just want to share some of that with you and give you some perspectives on that, right? So, if you think about this time that we live in, right, this is a very unique time for human civilization. Today we have what I call a convergence of technologies, right? So these technologies are there today together, right? So internet is there, connectivity is there, devices are there of all kinds, cloud computing is there, machine learning, data, deep learning, AI is there, and Internet of Things is there, blockchain is there, 3D printing is there, and so on and so forth, right? So the idea is that never before in the human civilization have all these technologies come together at the same time, right? So internet has been around for a long time, but there was no cloud computing, right? Or there were no cell phones, and cell phones came later. When cell phones came, connectivity came and cell phones came. And then, IoT was not there. Now IoT came. So today we have all this, and what we can do with all this together is something far more than what you could have done with each one of them independently. And that is our unique opportunity here, that what can we do when we have access to all of this at the same time, right? So I wanted to keep that in picture in mind and say what is the unique opportunity. It's not just about machine learning alone, it's about this ecosystem of technologies that is available to us. Now, obviously, technology is only as good as the use cases. And today, if you think about AI use cases, it has been applied only to some shallow problems, right? Not shallow, but interesting problem, but not really deep problems. So, for example, we have built the best search engines now, Google and others. So we know how to do search well, right? Similarly, we have applied AI machine learning to problems like, e-commerce, right? Where Amazon can know what you're going to buy next, or Netflix can know which movie you're going to buy next, watch next, right? Similarly, people have done a lot of good work in, for example, speech technologies, so Siri, Alexa, and all that. So what we have done so far in AI and machine learning is we have actually dabbled into some very, very shallow problems and solved them well and at a planet scale. But what we have not done is really apply AI to large scale ecosystem social problems like the previous speakers were talking about, this whole idea of social renaissance in technology, right? How will AI help my students who are in tier 2, tier 3 cities who don't have access to good teachers? How will AI help to our villages where we don't have doctors? How can we create AI doctor, or systems like medical systems that can reach to the the last man in the country, if you will, right? How will our farmers benefit from all these? How will we make our society safer? How will we unchoke our cities? How will we create better energy alternatives and how do we save the environment, right? These are the real problems that AI should be solving, not how to buy stocks and which stocks to buy, right? Which customer to send a coupon, or which ad to show to which person, or who is going to watch what movie. Those are very, very shallow problems, and the first thing I want to convey to this audience is we have not yet scratched the surface on the full potential of the technologies we just talked about. We have to start thinking about these problems, because if we don't do it here, we are wasting our time in doing some coding and AI problem. Because if these problems are not solved, it has failed us. That is where my clear message is. So hopefully, you're going to see enough people talk about these ideas, and that's where the Niti Aayog, the government of India, wants our next generation to focus on, which is, can we solve Indian problems in the Indian context, and what does that mean, and how can our youth participate in this next generation of India? Right? So let me now talk about technology as a journey, if you will. Technology by itself is nothing but an extension of who we are, right? So if we cannot lift heavy things, we created cranes. If we cannot run very fast, we created cars. If we cannot fly, we created aeroplanes, right? So technology is nothing but an extension of human capability into machines. Very simple, right? Now, what is it that makes humans so unique that animals and dogs and cats don't have that quality? And that is our intelligence, our ability to think, our ability to solve problems, our ability to understand language, our ability to understand speech. So these are the capabilities that makes human very, very different from other forms of life. And these capabilities of humans, if we want to extend to machines, that to me is AI, right? So if you want to define AI as a technology, it's just that all the cognitive abilities of humans, intelligence, learning, thinking, understanding, creativity, right? These are the capabilities. If we can extend to machines, why do we want to do it? You will see some examples, but those areas is where AI and machine learning comes into play. Right? Now, if you look at technology by itself, it means many things to many people. So I'm just going to break it down for you, right? So technology means tools, right? Our tools are evolving. If you look at sensors, our sensors are evolving. Computing is technology. So our computing all the way from whatever to cloud computing is evolving. Our interfaces are evolving. How humans interact with machines. Our idea of data is evolving. Our idea of AI and intelligence is evolving. And along with these 6 things, what is also evolving is our idea of what is a product. So I'm going to talk about what is it that our next generation product looks like, and how products are evolving over time. What is AI thinking and how is that evolving over time? So when I did my PhD in machine learning AI 20 years ago, I was a different kind of a data scientist. I had to learn different skill sets. What is it that you have to learn today is very different than what I had to learn 20 years ago, because AI thinking has evolved from what it was to what it is now, and what it is going to be from 5 years from now, we don't know. Right? And the last thing I want to talk about is the real skill of a data scientist. What is it that you should develop as a skill? Is it Python? Is it Java? Is it R? Is that the skill, or there is something else to it? That is also something we should talk about. Right? So let's first talk about that, because I think a lot of people, tell me that, hey, I want to learn machine learning. What should I do? Where should I start? What are the real skills of a full stack data scientist? Right? Like you've heard of term full stack software engineer. So I talk about full stack data scientist. So there are 5 skills that we should focus on. One is obviously your algorithms, right? So you're going to study a lot of machine learning algorithms. You can take online courses, offline courses, and all that. Then the next thing is, domain knowledge, which is how do we think about, any domain that you can go to, you can go to that domain. So, sorry. So basically, domain knowledge is, you cannot apply AI in thin air. You have to know the domain. So if you want to say AI in agriculture, you have to understand how agriculture works. If you say AI in healthcare, you need to understand how healthcare works. So every domain knowledge is very important. And how do we acquire domain knowledge before we start to do AI or data science on top of it is a very important skill, right? And you don't have to understand the domain at a very detailed level. You don't have to become a doctor before you can do AI in healthcare. So what is the right level at which you have to understand a domain to contribute to it is what you need to know. Next is big data computing. Obviously, data sets are growing and we need to learn those skills, which is how to process very large volumes of data in a very short time through parallel computing and all that. And the fourth is obviously math and science skills, math and statistics skills and optimization skill, right? So these four areas, if you are comfortable with, then what will happen suddenly is the fifth skill will evolve, and this skill is the most important skill. None of these four skills are useful if you have this final skill, which is what I call the skill of formulation. Formulation means, you remember those word problems you used to solve, right? Ki Radha has 5 apples and she gave 13 or whatever, 10 to somebody, and then whatever. So those kind of word problems converted to algebra problems was the first time we encountered formulation as a way of thinking, right? Now, formulation here in AI machine learning means, how do you think about a domain or a problem and say, how do I convert this into a machine learning algorithm? Which machine learning algorithm should I use? Or which combination of machine learning algorithm should I use? That is a skill called the skill of formulation. So on my LinkedIn, I have a talk that I want everyone to watch, which is data science and the art of formulation. And just look for Shailesh Kumar Geo, and you'll see my LinkedIn. There is a talk called the art of formulation, right? Then you will understand what is the real skill of a data scientist, right? All right, so let me now talk a little bit about all the other evolution, right? Tools are evolving and we understand that tools have grown. Sensors are evolving, right? If you look at sensors like what Galileo created 400 years ago, to now we can see at the far end of the galaxy, to now we can send a satellite all the way to the far end of the solar system. So our sensors are evolving. Not only this sensor, but sensors of all kind, like medical sensors are evolving, right? Today you can do very, very beautiful things with the Fitbit, for example, right? So we talked about IoT. So the whole area of IoT is really about sensor technology. So if you look at, soil IoT, for example, right? So a lot of soil sensors are created which can understand soil. Similarly, remote sensing data, right? Satellite data can give you a lot of clue about, all kinds of things. Where is mineral? Where is oil underground? Where is water table? All of that, right? What kind of soil it is? What crop is being grown? All of that. So sensors is a very important area to think about for every data scientist, because sensor is where data gets generated and that data is what you use. So understanding the sensors in different domains is going to be a critical part of a data scientist job, and you need to understand these sensors well. Computing is evolving, right? Obviously, and the next generation computers are going to be quantum computers. So if you are thinking about what can I study which is futuristic in nature, then I would suggest you start looking into quantum computing. So if you love physics, if you love mathematics, if you love quantum computing, quantum physics, then you should look at quantum AI or quantum computing as the next generation field of study. Because if you just study what is already mature today, if you just learn Java or Python and just learn some data science, you are among the millions and millions of students. But if you start learning a skill which is futuristic in nature, like quantum computing, then you'll be a rare commodity for the future. And since you have time on your side, I would highly urge that all of you should look at what are the future emerging technologies which are not yet commercialized in the market, and those technologies can you start learning now, right? So that you're future ready. And this is exactly what I did 20 years ago. I wanted to pick a topic for my PhD area, and I said, you know what, networking is a solved problem. Distributed computing is a solved problem. Multimedia is a solved problem at that time. What is not a solved problem at that time, where there were no jobs at that time, was AI and machine learning. These terms were just getting coined, right? So I said, this is the area I want to get into, because in 5 years when I'm coming out for after my PhD, these are the areas where there will be good jobs, right? Not in traditional areas. So this is one more thing I want to advise. Think of futuristic technologies that you want to learn now to stay ahead of the career curve. Yeah? The idea of data is evolving. When we were learning machine learning, data was an Excel spreadsheet with rows and columns. But today, your gene sequence is the data, your satellite is the data, every time you swipe a card is the data, right? Internet creates so much data. Every time you like something, tweet something is the data. And now IoT data has come, which is more like the heartbeat of the system, right? So every time, a sensor generates a ping to the system and say, this is the status of this device. So that is your IoT data, right? Which is a lot more than any of the other data put together. So the idea of data has evolved to anything that can be, created and analyzed is data. It doesn't have to be a rows and columns anymore, right? So that is the data has evolved. Interfaces are evolving. So if you look at interfaces which are very visual and all that, they take time to understand for people, right? So imagine if I want to launch Ola in a village or a large village or something, and I give you this interface, it will be very hard for people to understand. So how do you build beautiful interfaces which are conversational and natural in nature? So for example, can I not use a UI but a simple chatbot to do a conversational interface? And why do I want to even type if I can even get a speech-based interface? And speech is very important for India because speech is not about a cool option. Like in Alexa, if I say, turn on my video or turn on my AC, that is just a convenience that I can speak to my AC. But in India, when we say speech, it means completely different. It means how do I create speech understanding in 22 Indian languages so that all the people who are not English speaking can also come on the digital bandwagon. That is how critical and important speech is in the Indian context. So if you're interested in bringing social revolution in India with technology, you have to start with speech understanding in 20 Indian languages with all the accent variations and all that, right? So those are the important problems to be solved, and we expect Googles and Microsofts of the world to solve them so that we can copy their solution and just make the API call. That is not going to happen, right? So we need to work on these kind of problems going forward. Now, AI itself is a journey, and if I look at any company, any startup, any country also, they actually move from being an infrastructure company or a country to an automation company to a data company. So, for example, if I look at Google, 20 years ago, Google was just a software company. It was only creating, crawling the web, getting all the data into their servers, and then indexing them and making sure, and basic search was available. Then they said we cannot do this manually, so I need to automate that. So they automated the whole thing. So now nobody has to do it by themselves. The programs keep running, and the web as it grows gets crawled every day. Then they realized that they became a data company because every time somebody does a query, clicks on a search result, they record that. So now that record is real data for Google, not the web that they have consumed, but the click data is the real data for Google. So now Google is sitting on so much of click data, 3.5 billion queries happening per day. Every time somebody clicks on this query, this URL, third position, how many clicks, becomes a very rich source of data for Google. And now they want to say, how do you monetize this data? How do you improve your service with this? So then they became an AI company. Right? So when Google or any company realizes that they are sitting on an enormous amount of data, whether it is banks, whether it is hospitals, whether it is agriculture companies, or whether it is mobility companies like Ola, all of these companies are going through this revolution. In fact, Paytm announced that they wanted to hire 200 data scientists last year. Why would Paytm, which is a wallet company, want to hire data scientists? Because they realize this transition, that they know so much about how people are spending their money, where they're spending their money. There's so much data with them, they can actually build the best ad network for the country because they know what you like, what you shop, how much is your spending capacity and all that. And they can now become the best AI company because they are a good data company. So this transition is very important, and that is what is going on in the world today. So if you're wondering why everybody is talking about AI and all that, is because we have already gone through the first three revolutions. We already know how to do automation. IT revolution is done. Now it is the data to AI revolution that is going on, and we are part of this movie, right? So we are on this frame of that movie, and therefore we need to develop these kind of skills, right? So intelligence itself is evolving, and if I talk to a data science company and I ask them, what do you do in AI? There are four layers that they talk about, and you must have heard different names for it, right? Prescriptive, predictive, descriptive, and all that. So it's the same thing. Basically, one is what I call reporting the past. So if I can summarize the past in 10 different ways, that is one kind of AI, which is what we call business intelligence, right? This is only going to take you so far because you're not going to be able to use this to make decisions about the future. You can only summarize the past, and only some human has to look at that report and then decide what to do. So that is not there yet, right? Next is predicting the future. Can I not just summarize the past but actually predict the future? Because that is what real learning is. That means you're able to predict that if I drop something, it will fall. That is how we are predicting, right? We live our lives through prediction. So can I predict the future? Like if this kid is about to fail an exam, can I predict this crop is about to fail, right? Where will that locust storm that is coming in India, where will that go next? Can I predict, right? Based on wind patterns and past data and all that, right? Prediction. And now, if I can only predict, that is also not enough. If I say, yeah, I have predicted, this kid is about to fail, that crop is about to fail, this car is about to fail, this person is about to die. If I can just predict and not do anything, it's not good enough. So then the next thing comes, which is, can I create an alternate future and make sure that the kid doesn't fail by intervening, or make sure I give the right advisory to the farmer and say, no, I know I have predicted based on the satellite data, soil data, all that, rain patterns and all that. I know that your tomato crop will be destroyed if you don't do anything in the next 1 week. And I'm going to tell you that this is what you need to do. And that, prediction then becomes an action, is the critical transition from purely machine learning to data science, right? And then AI is really not just about one action, but it's about a sequence of actions such that eventually you will do a good job. It's like playing chess. You don't win a game or lose a game in one move, but it's a sequence of moves. So can I predict the next 5 sequences? If I do this, he will do that, then I'll do this, then he'll do that. Then I make the current move. So that is where AI really comes in, right? So long-term thinking. So these are the 4 evolutions of AI, if you will: business intelligence to machine learning to data science to artificial intelligence. And you can start with the bottom, but you have to start going to the top. Yeah. Now, what does AI do to a business? It really helps businesses make better decisions. So when I say better, what does better decisions mean, right? So one aspect of better is what we call broadcast to personalized decision. So if I'm sending a Sunday coupon to everybody and saying, these are my sale, that is a broadcast decision. But if I send very specific coupon to very specific people and say, this is the best coupon for you, this is the best coupon for you, given our digital media today, I can personalize my decisions, right? So my better example is, if you look at our education system today, it's a broadcast decision. Everybody studies the same thing from the same NCERT textbook at the same pace. There is no personalization in our education. There is personalization in our, what we watch on YouTube or Netflix or Facebook. There is personalization even in our pizzas and our subways, but there is no personalization in education. Can you imagine that the most important thing has not yet been done? So there's a lot of opportunity to personalize education, to personalize healthcare. Why should I give aspirin to everybody for the same symptom? Maybe it depends on what your other parameters are, right? So, or your, are you diabetic, or what is your parental history or your genetic data? How do I personalize my decision is one of the key aspects. Second is, how do I not make decisions on a calendar? Every Sunday I will do this, send these coupons, or every whatever I will do this. So today we do things on a batch mode. Can I do it in real time, right? And as soon as something is about to happen, can I react to it very quickly, and real time I can do this, right? So for example, if your Fitbit has detected that your heart rate is going up for the last 3 days and you're about to get a heart attack or whatever, it should be trigger driven, and not no, every 3 months you have to get a health checkup done. So you understand the difference between 3-month health checkup versus a Fitbit based, real-time decisions, right? Similarly, if I can predict, can I be proactive about my decisions, right? I don't have to react. Today we are a reactive society. The kid has failed, now I'm going to put a tutor on him. The crop has failed, now this farmer is going to commit suicide, and then we'll all go do a dharna somewhere, right? So we are reacting today. But with machine learning, we can predict that this is about to happen, and we can actually prevent that from happening. So that is a very important thing. And the last thing is, today we make very tactical decisions of the now, right? So what happens if a farmer wants to maximize the yield of his crop today? He can put a lot of fertilizer and pesticide on the crop now, and what will happen to the long-term health of the soil? He will destroy his long-term potential for the short-term gain. And that is what we call a tactical to strategic decisions. So AI today can help us make all these 4 levels of transformation, right? From broadcast to personalized, batch to real-time, reactive to proactive, tactical to strategic decisions. Okay? Now, AI is evolving, and all these aspects of AI are evolving. You're going to hear, and you must have heard many people talk about different ideas. So I won't go into that. But my real question now is, if an AI is now like a 4-year-old child, right? It can understand language to some extent. It can understand speech to some extent. It can understand vision to some extent. It can understand how to read documents and understand text. It can also create strategies. What can you do with this capability is another group of people. So I divide people into 2 types. One group of people who will continue to improve these capabilities. So if you are passionate about speech technology, you're going to put a lot of your effort on improving speech technology. But if you're passionate about building a solution in agriculture, healthcare, wherever, then you're going to work at that level. You're going to use these technologies to build that solution, right? So there are 2 kinds of thinkers. One is technology thinkers who improve the algorithms and models. And then there are solution thinkers who actually build solutions on top of existing technology. You need to figure out what kind of a person you are and then approach your next career move in that way. Yeah. So I'll give you some examples. So if you think about the first generation products that our parents, grandparents were excited about, they got excited about cars and TVs and washing machines and all that. Now these products came with what we call programmed intelligence, right? Programmed intelligence means it's kind of like instinct level intelligence, right? If I change the channel changes. If I take the iPhone or phone or iPad in the sunlight, it becomes brighter. If the brake fuel is less, some light goes on in the car. So these are if statement based basic instinct level intelligence that was programmed into these products, and these products never improved over time. They just came with a level of intelligence, pretty much like dogs and cats, right? Animals are born with basic instincts, and that's all the intelligence they have. They don't become progressively more intelligent over time. Only humans do that. And that is one of the critical differences between what I call instinctive intelligence and the next level, which is what I call crowdsourced intelligence. So the next level of intelligence is about the following. So the next generation products which you guys grew up with, these products are not the physical products, right? These are very different from the previous generation products. But we have learned something very fascinating in these last 20 years. I'll tell you what we have learned in the last 20 years in this whole technology world. We have learned how to take one single idea like search or recommendation or link prediction, social networking. We have taken one such idea, built a very fascinating product on top of that idea, and scaled it at the planet level using cloud computing. That's what we have learned so far. This is where the state of the art is. So if you take search, take 20 years to build the greatest search engine in the world, take it all the way, it scales to billions of people, and it does a very fantastic job of searching. They have mastered search. In Amazon or Netflix or whatever, they have mastered recommendation, right? So every company is built on one idea. Now, that is one thing we have learned, how to scale, how to take one machine learning idea and build a company around it. Third thing we have learned is the power of crowdsourcing. That means if nobody uses Google search, then Google search will not become better. If nobody buys at Amazon, Amazon recommendation will not become better. Why? Because people are giving label data to Google and saying, look, you're showing me this result at the third place for this query, but actually hundreds of people are clicking on that third result and nobody is clicking on the first and second result. So that means the third result is better. So Google will move that up to the first result. That is how Google will use the feedback data to improve the search engine. This art we have learned in the last 20 years, which is how to capture feedback data and improve our services. And that shows the importance of how people participation in these algorithms is so essential, that as we use the products become better. This ability is called, machine learning. Over a period of time, as more people give it more data, it will become better. It sounds like a baby growing up, right? If you have a baby born, which is like product 1.0, and the more it experiences life, the more data it consumes, the better it becomes, right? It has the ability to understand the neural networks are present, but this data will make it better over time. This ability we have mastered is a very profound thing if you think about it. Now, what are my next generation products going to be? We are not going to make tremendous improvement over product 2.0 anymore. We have already mastered them, right? They have reached a saturation point. And if you think, no, Google is great, I want to be a search engine person, you're not going to do anything profoundly different or difficult because it has already been mastered. It's a saturated area. What are the next generation products we should think about? And that is where I want you to think about next, because if you are thinking next 5 years of your career, where do you want to be? You don't want to be just a social networking person or a search engine person or a recommendation engine person. You need to think very big and very different, because the transformation that is about to happen is going to be as drastic as 1 to 2, 2 to 3 will be very drastic, right? So today we are talking about smart cities or connected homes or connected car ecosystems. What is a connected car ecosystem? Today, imagine that your car, you optimize your own commute every day, right? When you go to office or whatever, college. But imagine if all the cars in the city are connected on the cloud, they all know where the boss wants to go, and they all jointly optimize everybody's commute and say, you start at this time and take this route, you start at this time and take this route. Then what will happen? Everybody's commute is optimized jointly, as opposed to each one trying to optimize their own commute. That's an example of next generation AI, which is what I call ecosystem thinking, right? How do you think about a smart city? What is a smart city? Imagine, the water requirements of the city, the electricity requirements of the city, the commute requirements of the city, the telecom requirements of the city are dynamic. You don't need the same amount of water at the same place throughout the day, or same amount of electricity, or same number of cabs in the same location. It is a dynamic thing, right? As people go to work, they commute, they come back, what do? The data requirements, in the telecom network, electricity, all that is changing. Can we optimize a city at that level, right? Can we understand the patterns? Can we optimize it? That's a smart city, right? So think of these as the next generation products. These are your moonshots, right? And how do you go from where we are to there is what I want you to think about, right? Now, AI is actually also a mindset. So, a lot of people will tell you AI as a collection of this, that, and the other. I want to give you a very simple definition of how AI works and what we can think about. So imagine that there is some reality out there, right? There is a reality of how people buy, what they buy, when they buy. There is a reality of how people commute and all that, right? There is some reality out there. Now imagine that we have sampled a small amount of data of that reality, right? So, for example, Ola has its own version of commute behavior of a city, right? The metro has its own version of commute behavior of the city. The bus system of the city has its own version of a sample of the city. Together, if they paint the overall picture, they will come up with the right reality, right? Ola versus Uber have a different view of reality, albeit very similar, right? So you understand this idea that there is some reality and we sample the data from it, and then we convert that data into a representation, into a knowledge about that thing. That morning time, 8 to 12 is a peak hour. Now, how did that come about? Because we analyze the data, right? So we refine and discover knowledge all the time with that data. And once we do that, we build a model of reality. So from reality, we go to model of reality. And what is a model of reality is your machine learning models, right? So all of us in our brain also have model of reality. Based on our life experiences, we have our own idea of what reality is. Nobody knows what reality is, right? It's all in your mind what you think reality is, and it is conditioned by your life experiences so far, right? That's why different people are different, because our experiences are different. And now what we do with this knowledge, we go back and interpret the same data differently, right? So for example, when you read Harry Potter, when you are, let's say, 6-year-old, versus when you read Harry Potter when you are 10-year-old, you're not going to interpret it the same way. You're going to interpret it differently. Harry Potter at 10-year-old, you can understand it more. Now the data is not changed. Harry Potter is still the same book. What has evolved between 6 year and 10 year is your idea of reality. So now you can understand humor better. You can understand sarcasm better, right? You can understand the fine nuances of whatever better, right? So that changes your interpretation of the data. Same data interpreted better with a better model, trained longer, right? So this is your learning loop. So a lot of IT people think that every system is an input-output system. But really, AI is not an input-output system. It's a learning loop system. So you never build a model and say, I'm done. You always put together a cycle and say, how do I keep learning the model as I keep getting more and more data? That is how you need to think about AI, not an input-output system. I'll get some data, I'll build a model, and I'll be done. Right? That's not how it is. All right, so I'm going to skip this slide. Now, obviously, a lot of people would have talked about this. So I'll quickly go through it because I want to cover something even more important after this, right? So there are many classes of AI algorithms now available, right? One class is you can summarize a lot of data. You can say, these are your customers. Can you cluster them into clusters? And now these are my customers who are, going to buy, who typically buy those products versus the other products. So you can summarize your data however large it is. So all the banking customers can be summarized one way, retail customers in one way, agriculture farms in one way, students in one way, LinkedIn profiles in one way. So you can come up with different ways of summarizing everything. These are algorithms available. We can also understand language very well now, right? So you must have heard of talks on, NLP and embeddings and all that. A beautiful area. How do humans understand language? And now can machines understand language the same way, right? So here is an exercise we did where we learned a lot of, using the reviews of restaurants, a lot of text data. We learned meanings of words and meanings of sentences. And then we asked the machine, tell me the meaning of the word ambience. And the machine came up with these automatically. It said music playing in background, cozy atmosphere, laid back atmosphere, very trendy, nice decor. These are all examples of ambience according to the machine that has never been to a restaurant. That is the beauty of all this, that a collective set of experiences people have written, if all of that a machine can read, it can figure out what it might mean without actually experiencing it, right? And that is how machines can learn meanings of words and phrases or even sentences. So, the top sentence is a input sentence, and I said, give me similar sentences. So it will give you similar sentences, right? So machines can understand language. They can extract knowledge. So if I look at the sentence on the top, this is a piece of text, which if you are a good, if you have a BSc in medicine or something, you can really understand it in one shot. But what is your brain doing when you read a sentence like that? What you do internally is you're creating the bottom thing called the knowledge graph. Knowledge graph is a very important area in AI. If you want to learn deep learning versus knowledge graph, I would say learn knowledge graph first. So go ahead and write this down. What is a knowledge graph? How does it work? I want to understand this better. And then converting text into knowledge graph is a very important area. And then knowledge graph, you can now use this knowledge graph to answer questions, or you can use it to do summarization or translation or whatever you want to do, right? This knowledge graph creation is a very important part of your NLP. So on my LinkedIn, there is another talk that I want you to see if you are interested in such things. It's called Thinking Machines, Towards Thinking Machines. So if you watch that talk, you will understand what language and knowledge graph and all that is. Right? Another thing machines can do now is they can interpret a lot of data, images, text data, right? So what is sentiment analysis? You don't have to think about it as a positive or negative sentiment. You can say, here is a piece of text. What are the entities we are talking about? So Flipkart and Moto E. What is the aspect of that entity we are talking about? So for Flipkart, we are talking about the delivery. For Moto E, we are talking about all these properties. And then what is the sentiment for that aspect of that entity? That is the level of interpretation we should be able to do. Because you can actually like some aspects of some entity and don't like some aspects of the other entities, right? So how do you think about that? Another class of algorithms is what we call prediction algorithm. This we all understand. Can you predict if transaction is fraud? This customer is about to churn? Is hacking going on in my cloud? Right? What are you doing when your phone is behaving in a certain way? So these are all prediction algorithms. Okay. Then there are recommendation algorithms. We understand that. So there's another class of algorithms, right, which are used in common. Another class of algorithm which nobody teaches but are very important now is what I call reasoning algorithm, right? How do you think about a sequence of steps given where you are, right? What is the reasoning going forward? So your NLP, your chatbot is not an NLP problem, it's a reasoning problem, right? So on and so forth. Then there is reinforcement learning problem, which is about how do you say what is my current state, what are my possible actions, what is the best action I can take, and if I take that best action, what is going to be my next state, and did I get reward or punishment because of that, and should I now do this and continue, or should I learn a different recommendation of actions, right? So that is another class of thing. Now, obviously, sorry, Mahesh, tell me if I need to close because time is not something I'm looking at right now. Should I continue another 15
Yeah.
minutes?
Go ahead, Shailesh.
Okay.
Still you can go ahead 5 to 10. No
Yeah.
issues.
Okay. Yeah, I'll close by 5. All right. So why we are talking about all these algorithms is now I want you to understand AI in a top-down fashion. So far we have think about AI in a bottom-up fashion. Now, what is any intelligent system going to look like is very simple. Every intelligent system, whether it is a search engine, whether it's a healthcare system or an agriculture system or whatever it is, it's a very simple system, and there are only 4 or 5 components to it. The first part of AI architecture is how do I take stimulus data, right? Data coming from sensors, whether it is Fitbit or SMS coming about your payment in the bank or whatever it is, right? Stimulus data that we are collecting. How do you analyze the data and convert it to what we call a state vector, right? A state vector is a semantically high level representation of what is really going on, right? So for example, if you have a lot of SMSs coming that say, reminder of payments, then what is the state of the person? The state of the person is you are not financially a disciplined person, right? If your SMSs are coming that say your credit card is cancelled, we are going to send you a notice, you have not paid your EMI in the last so many months, all that, then what is the state? Your credit score becomes your state vector, right? Similarly, in the Fitbit world, healthcare world, I can come up with your state of health. What is your cardiac health score? What is your gastric health score? So this idea of converting all your stimulus data into a state vector is one of the most important parts of AI thinking. This gives you the state idea. Okay, where we are. Is this customer a happy customer, a loyal customer, a valuable customer, a fraudulent customer? Based on all the data, can I come up with these 5-6 numbers to define the state of the customer, right? Or a state of a student in the education world. Now, once I do the state thinking, then I can say, okay, given this state, what is the best action I can take? So now you can say, if you are in this state, take this action. If you are in this state, take this action, right? And then you manifest the action, you generate a response. So on one side, I have stimulus. On the other side, I have response. And this whole cycle is what any stimulus response system does, right? Now, if the response is adequate for the given stimulus, then your systems are working well. But if it is not, then something is wrong. So imagine you go to a doctor and you have some symptoms. So that is your stimulus data, right? Now the doctor then decides that you have dengue or malaria. That is your state. He has converted all your symptoms into a single disease, right? That is your state. Then he has given you a medicine. That is your action. Then you have taken the medicines or not is up to you. That is the response. Now, did you get well or not is your feedback. And if your feedback is negative, that means you did not get well. What do? Maybe what is wrong? Maybe his diagnosis is wrong. He said dengue, but I have some other problem. Or maybe his prescription is wrong. He didn't give me the right medicine. Or I didn't take the medicine properly the way he told me. So these are my three systems: analysis, reasoning, and synthesis of action. All three are improved with feedback. This is how Google is built. This is how we are going to build smart cities. This is exactly how we are going to transform education and healthcare. There is no other architecture of AI, and all your machine learning and AI algorithms that you can think of are either your stimulus to state algorithms that tell you how to interpret the data coming in, or they are your state to action algorithms that tell you what to do if you are in this state, right? That's all there is to machine learning and AI. And after this, if you think about what AI is, it's a very simple problem after this. Yeah? All right, so there is a template of how to think about AI in the real world. So whenever I kind of talk to people about how to incorporate AI, I only give them 5 things to think about, which is what is the metric that you're optimizing. So this is my refineries in Reliance. What are it that I'm trying to optimize? I'm trying to minimize shutdowns and maximize efficiency. What is the domain knowledge do I have? Right? So I know everything about the chemistry of the plant. What is the stimulus data I'm generating? So this is the data that I'm getting every now and then. How do I convert the stimulus data to the state vector? Can I say this part is efficient, this part is not efficient, this part is about to die, and all that? And given the state, what should be my response? Should I increase the temperature, pressure? Should I shut this down tomorrow? What is my action? Right? These are the 5 things we need to think about, and that's it. So therefore, domain knowledge is important. Your ability to handle large amount of data is important. Most important, your ability to convert stimulus data into a state vector. That is a very important thing. And your next thing is state vector to response. If you can think about this and measure your metrics and keep improving them over time, that's how children learn to walk and speak. That's how big chemical plants are run, right? I can do the same thing in any other domain. So if I look at retail domain, for example, it's the same thing, right? What are your metrics? What domain knowledge do I have? What data do I collect every now and then? What is the state of affairs? How do I describe the state of a customer, state of a product, state of a store? What are those dimensions in terms of which I can define this? And then, given those dimensions, what response should I generate? Right? Same thing in agriculture we talked about. Now, if I look at agriculture, why is agriculture not yet benefiting from AI? Is it that we don't know the metrics? We know the metrics. We want to double farmers' income. We want to increase the yield of the crop. Right? We want to make sure farmers get the right price for their crop. We know all that. Right? Metrics are known. Domain knowledge is more than any other subject. Today, we know more about agriculture than anything else. So domain knowledge is enough. What is missing in agriculture is stimulus data. Today, we don't know which farmer grew what crop at what time, when, and what was the practice he used, when did he water, the logging, log like we log our apps, we are not logging agriculture, right? So we don't have stimulus data. We don't even know the soil composition of every soil of every farm, right? We are not able to collect the satellite data along with the soil IoT data, along with the historical data of the crop and all that together. If we could do that, we could transform, because everything else we know. How to convert stimulus to state we know. We know how to convert state to response in agriculture. Stimulus layer is missing. See, this is what I call solution thinking, which means you don't think about, one machine learning model. You think about the entire solution, and then you say, what is it that is missing? So in agriculture, stimulus layer is missing. Right? Same thing in education. Again, we know everything about education, but what is missing? What is missing is the stimulus data. Today, what happens? Children go to school, they write their homework on a copy is corrected by teacher, they get feedback, whatever they get, and that's it. The copy goes to the trash after the whole year is gone. That data, if I was collecting for millions and millions and millions of students over the last 50 years, imagine how much data will I have about, which problems the student is struggling, which concept he is not learning, what he knows, what he doesn't know, what he's struggling with, where does he need a hint. All that is stimulus data. But without a digital system, I cannot collect all that data. So now the new age education will be digital in nature. People will work on their iPads or whatever and do their homeworks and everything. All the logging will happen, like Amazon logs what product you're searching, what you're browsing. Imagine if in education we could do the logging, then we can convert that to a state vector and say this kid knows this concept well, not know this concept well. And then he can generate the response and say, show him, he should learn this concept next, he should watch this video next, or he should do this next, right? So today Khan Academies of the world are not adaptive. They're not personalized. They give you the same sequence for everything. So that is digital, but not AI enabled. And that is the difference. We need to go from digital to AI enabled also, personalized. Right? So let me just close. So these are my guiding principles now. First is AI is not installed. AI improves over time. So we have to be patient. AI will work and then slowly it will improve. Right? Second is your data is not just your internal data. There's a lot of public data available. So people who understand public data and its availability, right, like census data, weather data, this data, that data, I think we'll build a better model than just using your own data, right? Next is data science is not really about data. It's really about thinking of the state that we talked about, right? Once you understand the state, then you will be able to know what data you should be collecting or using and what output action you will generate. So don't think about, oh, I have this data, I need to do this. Think about what state should I start with and then go backward on data and forward on action. State is important, not data. Data is just a way to calculate the state. Another thing I tell people is, yes, you need to know how to build machine learning models, but models is not what you build. What you build is a modeling platform. So if you are a data scientist who doesn't know how to build a modeling platform, you're not a good data scientist yet. So you need to know engineering skills to actually put your training and your inferencing in a production system. Only then you are done. Because if you only build a model and give it to somebody else, you're not going to build models every day, right? Manually 3 a.m. So you need to orchestrate that automatically into a modeling platform. And we need to think about models not as a collection of individual models, but as an ecosystem of models. What model will produce what output, which will go to what other models, and then the whole thing will come alive. Like you have a architecture in IT, similarly you have an architecture in AI also, right? Models passing their output to other models. And this is a very important insight. If you are building a product, if you're an IT thinker, you're only going to build a product. But if you're an AI thinker, you're not going to build just a product, you're going to build a sensor. So Paytm is a sensor now. Paytm is not just a wallet. Google is not just a search engine, it's a sensor. It collects a lot more data than the service it gives you. And that is what makes this a sensor thinking. And now you can imagine what you can do if you build your products with very intense data collection in the pipeline all the time. And the last thing I will leave you with this thought that India will benefit from AI, obviously, but I think AI will benefit from India a lot more. And I want you to think about this sentence that if we can do speech in 22 Indian languages and 22 Indian, and if we can do NLP in 22 Indian languages, that is a bigger challenge that AI has not solved yet. AI is still not there yet. So it is up to us to solve those challenges to take India to the next level. And not only that, to take AI to the next level because we are able to solve these next generation challenges. Yeah. All right. That's all I have. Thank you so much. And I will take some questions now. Let me see how to go to the... I think we are out of time. So feel free to, connect on my LinkedIn and, we can have a chat there. If you have any questions, I can answer. That'll be, we can do it there. or you can send it to Mahesh and he can email me and I can try to respond to it. Yeah. But watch my talks on LinkedIn. There's a lot of material out there. You can understand a lot of such ideas. I have expanded on these ideas a lot more. Yeah? All right. Thank you, Mahesh. Anything